So a continuum that takes into account the 2 or 3 or multi-layered context in terms of people's ability to want to use this technology or to have access to this technology becomes critical. And I'm glad that somebody was talking about sensitizing and exposing management in African institutions to this whole issue that we're talking about. Because if you go to an institution where the top leadership is not glued into this stuff, the institution is taken 5, 6, 7, 10 years back because it becomes a political decision rather than an educational decision that takes into account that there are these resources that students and researchers have to get access to. So this is why we have been forced by our experience on the continent to think in terms of a continuum, to think of different contexts that apply on the African continent. There are countries where it is easy to buy a computer. There are countries where it is not possible to buy a computer for the average academic. There are countries, I live in Kenya, certain institutions, academics in those institutions have to pay for their own internet connectivity. It's not available from the institution. So if you begin to talk about what we are discussing right now in terms of accessing resources and accessing knowledge on the internet or on the net, one has to begin to talk about the different kinds of contexts that exist on the African continent. But I do applaud the fact that we have to sensitize people in management in African institutions, people in the ministries of education, and people in the regulatory authorities on the African continent. As I said this week, talking to people in Tanzania, it's so fascinating, even in such an important institution, to hear how the major actors who make decisions about availability of bandwidth and connectivity and visa licenses, how they view technology and the use of technology, either in rural development, in agriculture, in health, or in education in particular.
Thanks. Thank you.
Well, can I just say one last word to Stephen there on the comment, and I'm interested about the rural areas and the role of radio and all the other things. And the rural areas are owners not only of hunger and poverty, but they're also the owners of a lot of knowledge that we need to share. So, that has to be seen as part of the continuum.
But I think we have to find ways of making sure that that knowledge that people in rural areas is shared, but that knowledge is collected and organized so that that knowledge can then be translated into improving people's lives.
The concept would be more of a sort of rural knowledge network. We had a very interesting workshop earlier this year with Carnegie Mellon and a number of Indian collaborators who really pushed this concept through in a sense of stacking up the hierarchy of geography to try and get and mobilize knowledge. The trouble is, of course, it doesn't digitize well. Knowledge works best when it's in this non-digital environment, this analog environment. Putting it down into a digital format and moving it around is not an easy task. I do believe, as we've just said, that it's a multimedia environment. It's not just computers, it's these things as well. One-to-one technology works very well either in SMS format or in spoken format. And this is the growth engine of African communication, as it is in most other continents. Despite all the patronizing comments from various donors 10 years ago that these things had no role in Africa, nobody told the Africans that, luckily. So it's a multifaceted thing, and it isn't easy also to transfer European models or North American models into these other environments where you have so many other factors at play.
Yeah. Can I really want to, I support what you said about, talking to people in our rural areas and people in our communities, because if we do not do that, we work very hard to try to bring this technology, and in some cases, people will be very negative. So I just want to show you this slide that I borrowed from a colleague at Harvard, and it explains what we are talking about.
Oh no, this one.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's what happens. Thank you.
This is funny. Somebody sent me this video last week. If you sit there long enough, lunch arrives.
Thank you.
So I'd like to thank all the speakers today. It's been a very entertaining and very interesting day. I've certainly learned a lot, and we definitely want to try and capture the PowerPoints if we can for those that were here and want to see them, and those that weren't who could be informed by them. So thanks very much, and thanks of course to Wes who provided us with the environment.
The reception is out there now in the bistro. If you want to
The
go,
reception is now functioning.
just around the corner to the left.
It's a very interesting.
Education networking infrastructure. On behalf of the sponsors of the event, IDRC, Partnership for Higher Education in Africa, the Open Society Initiative for Southern Africa, the Swedish International Development Agency, and the World Bank Institute. I'm so pleased to see such a good turnout for this event. My name is Steve Song, and I work for the International Development Research Center, and I'm going to open the event today just by attempting to give a bit of a sense of a bit of a sense of history to the event. Oh, sorry, before I start, I should mention full translation is available for everyone at the conference, so you're welcome to speak in French or in English. You're also welcome to pose questions from the floor in French and English. So don't feel constrained. And you might wish, because there will be speakers in both French and English, you may wish to seek out now, as I'm talking to you, a translation unit if you were not fully bilingual. Okay. So, at IDRC, we've been thinking actively about this issue of research and education networking in Africa for the last couple of years. And one of the first reflections I had on research and education networking was that African universities were the internet pioneers on the continent. If we think about where the internet emerged in Africa, I think of universities in Africa as pioneers. In particular, in the late 1980s, a connection between the Network Startup Resource Center at the University of Oregon and with universities in South Africa, which then rapidly moved on to universities in Zambia, in Mozambique, in Uganda, Kenya, Namibia. Those were the entry points. That's where those connections were born. They were born on very inexpensive infrastructure, on telephone lines, on dial-up infrastructure, and it spread very quickly. And in fact, that's where IDRC first got involved in research and education networking with some small initiatives to support university networking, such as ESANet. And it's also where the Economic Commission for Africa became involved in university networking in that very early stage in supporting projects like Kabika. And it was at that stage, in the late 1980s, early 1990s, that progress happened very fast. You know, the connectivity leapt from university to university and seemed to spread like wildfire. And mostly around email. It was mostly a facilitator of email. And then didn't really go much further than that. And the combination of the barrier of going beyond dial-up connectivity and funding cutbacks to university meant that there was a sort of plateau that had been reached until about the mid-1990s when scientific publications, scientific data began to become available on the internet, and people began to see a vision for how universities in Africa might be enabled through access to scientific publications. And that's where you began to see the emergence of initiatives such as IDRE, Agora, African journals online, institutions like INASP and IFL, and in particular the AU, which was a division of the delivery of tertiary level education enabled through the internet. And it was around that time, too, that other donors were beginning to see the potential of infrastructure at universities. And you saw initiatives such as the Leland Initiative, Swedish UDA, the Dutch EGIS, all investing in campus-level infrastructure for universities. And in West Africa, the AUF investing in the Francophone countries in tertiary infrastructure. And all of that led to a kind of crisis point. A kind of crisis point where there was this wealth of information, wealth of scientific publications that was sort of pushing at the boundaries of Africa, but the pipes were way too small and way too expensive. And over the course of the mid-1990s, you begin to see this differential emerge by this tremendous potential of access to resources and potential for collaboration, and no corresponding increase in the internet infrastructure to facilitate access to that. And I think we all know some of the reasons why that happened, not the least the regulatory challenges of the incumbent telcos who did nothing to introduce competition and bring down prices. So there we are. We're in the mid-1990s, and there is this sort of this dichotomy, this almost split vision, if you like, of content enabling universities, yet content or access restriction. And the first we at IDRC began to see of change here was actually the Partnership for Higher Education, who, in working with their partner universities, saw this problem as clear as day, that the access was simply not there, and put together a team of people who are appropriately called the bandwiths, and many of whom are in the audience today, to look at this problem and see what can be done. And one of the obvious conclusions of this report was that African universities were all being singled out individually for extortion by internet service providers. As tiny individual actors, they were being charged extremely high prices. And why wasn't there more consolidation? Why wasn't there more consortium of universities to drive down the price? And that came clearly out of the first bandwith report. That led to, it was that partnership investment in that paper that sparked our interest, and we began to see the potential of IDRC. And that led to a couple of things. In particular, an event at the IDRE conference in January 2004, where we supported a number of actors to come together to talk about the issue. That half-day session at the IDRE conference in 2004 led to, on the one hand, for IDRC, a desire to bring the various actors together to get more sort of coalescence, more consistency of outlook, and more collaboration. And towards that end, we funded a number of studies under what we called PARENS, or Promoting Access to Research and Education Networking in Africa, a study of initiatives of tertiary access initiatives in Africa, and looking at models of coordination, and also looking at donors that are funding access in Africa. Meanwhile, the World Bank, through its relationship with the ATIC study, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, and that was carried out by the AU in partnership with Cyberplex Africa. And it also was the moment in which the partnership met the African Virtual University, which led to groundbreaking action there. So over the course of 2004, we at IDRC were kind of agonizing over, what needs to happen to move forward. And while we were agonizing, the Partnership for Higher Education was active and formed a relationship with the African Virtual University to create, I think, the first VSAT consortium to purchase bandwidth on behalf of African universities. And that's something you'll hear more about today, but it is a landmark in connectivity for African universities. The next milestone after that was earlier this year in January at the annual general meeting of the AAU. And it was at that meeting where the ATICS report was launched and the PARENS reports were launched, and there was an overwhelming message delivered by the Vice Chancellors to the AAU that they wanted the AAU to take leadership in this area of African research and education networking. And that was another big step forward, I think. That led to the Swedish CEDA and IDRE-sponsored Open Access Workshop in Maputo, where finally, at least for us, we began to see a sense of clarity over how to break down the problem of research and education networking in Africa. And it's actually what the agenda for today is based on, a kind of four-layer approach to addressing the issues of African research and education networking, realizing that every link in the chain of connectivity needs to be strong. So looking at campus networking at the base level, at national research and education networks at the next level, and regional connectivity, regional initiatives at the next level, and finally at continental coordination. And that was kind of a breakthrough for us, and led to a collaborative effort with SARUA, the Southern African Universities Association, with Swedish CEDA, and some of the emerging MRENs in Southern Africa and IDRC to investigate the potential of universities purchasing fiber in Africa. And that's yet another milestone forward, fiber that will cross national boundaries. And after that, things seemed to pick up very quickly, and a number of initiatives emerged that were addressing research and education networking in Africa. And in fact, it seemed like our efforts at coordination had fallen apart sometime in midsummer, because there was an Internet 2 event being sponsored in September, with a CERN event that was being sponsored in September, with an ITU UNU event that was being sponsored in September, all on the topic of African research and education networking. And I'm happy to say, with a lot of goodwill and collaboration, those events built on each other and really began to improve sort of coordination and also African participation in driving this agenda. And that brings us to where we are now, today, where I think you'll see news of many initiatives that are being launched at a variety of levels to address this issue. And the other thing I'd like to close with is that, we live in a world where economic growth is driven by ideas. And those, many of those ideas are incubated in universities. You only have to look at the billionaires at Google to realize that 6 years ago, there were PhD students. Google was incubated in the university. Mark Shuttleworth and his Ubuntu and the Shuttleworth Foundation. It was at university that his idea to spawn thought consulting emerged. Universities are a unique place. They're a place where there's energy and space and time for ideas to generate and to spawn. But without that critical bandwidth, those ideas won't have achieved the kind of critical mass of interaction and opportunity that they could otherwise achieve. So the opportunity exists now, I think, to put African universities back where they should be, for African universities to take back the internet as its rightful domain for innovation, for creativity, and for driving social and economic growth. And I hope that's what we'll see today. So with that, thank you, and once again, and I'd like to invite the Secretary General of the African Association of Universities, Aki Sawyer, to come and address you now. Thanks.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome you to this conference which, from the account that Steve has given of the road to Tunis, ought to be a conference with a difference. My function this morning is to welcome you and to introduce very briefly the conference theme and to express what we hope will be the outcome of our deliberations. Let me step back from Steve's account for a second to remind all of us of the very special role that African universities and other research institutions play as nodes of knowledge production and dissemination in their countries. It is true that the universities and research centers everywhere have this role. But I think in Africa more than anywhere else, this role is absolutely essential. Our development turns largely upon the work of only a few institutions in the knowledge area. And therefore, more than anywhere else, empowering our knowledge institutions is crucial to everything else that we do for developing our continent. We know also that in order for them to do their work properly, they need to be integrated into the world knowledge system effectively enough to draw optimum from the global knowledge pool and to also make contributions to it. In the digital age, this requires connectivity of a very high order. Yet we all know how very poor our connectivity is to the global pool. We know that the cost of access is so high that many of our institutions operate very, very much on the periphery of the global system. We know also that none of our institutions is strong enough or advanced rapidly to be able to play its role as a knowledge node for its country effectively. Again, we know that all our institutions, all of them, are in need of very substantial revitalization and strengthening, not least in the area of connectivity and integration of ICT into teaching, learning, and research. So as we heard, even as this explosion of knowledge across the globe, even as it has become possible at the present republic to access information on virtually every topic, at the same time, the cost and scarcity of access is proving a major constraint on the work of our leading knowledge centers. The answer, of course, lies in a number of things, and there are many players involved in this, from our governments to our partners abroad, but also centrally to our own role as institutions of learning and research. We all know how much has been done in terms of expanding internet access through getting cheaper and larger amounts of funding. What I'd like to stress very briefly, however, is the demand side of this issue. It is appropriate for us to think very hard at this stage about the need to develop content and methodologies that are appropriate to actually enhance teaching, learning, research, and service. To think also of human capacity for designing, managing, and monitoring systems and equipment. And finally, to think about the structures of collaboration, production, dissemination, and using knowledge and skills. Essentially, to think in terms of networking of our institutions across the countries, between the countries, and across continents. This is an important point to emphasize, because it is this demand side that will generate the pressure for pushing for cheaper and better access. At the same time, it is that same demand side that makes sense of access. Because ask yourself, access to what? For what? It is only when there is capacity locally to use the access and to integrate the knowledge into teaching and research that the fight for access actually needs. And therefore, today's work is important not only in terms of expanding access, but also in thinking of what to make of that access. Steve has given a very good account of the history of this process on the continent, from the awareness of the need to expand access to the efforts being made to help expand that access. And he has noted the special effort, many trying to do the same thing and not doing the thing. The result that despite all our efforts and all our energies, our members, our institutions, were not getting the full benefit of the initiatives. Clearly, what was required was some form of centralization to help coordinate the various efforts and give them value. A clearinghouse for information about this entire area to make it easy for anybody interested in getting information on the access issue to get it quickly. An important role also for collective action to maximize the negotiating power, but also the capacity to use effectively the new knowledge, and a very important role of advocating and lobbying at the highest levels with those who make policies which affect the whole issue, who gets access and at what price. That is the lead up to this discussion here. Because facing this crisis, all the African universities and others who assembled in Cape Town in February came to the conclusion after hearing the Parent report, the Atlas report, and other evidence, that it was time for us to begin to work together more closely, not only as institutions, but also as donors. Donors, governments, institutions, all of us in the same enterprise should begin to work a bit more closely, in a more integrated fashion, to ensure we get the best out of our efforts. The conference, therefore, has the AAU as the representative of the African higher education community, and a neutral body in this business, whose sole reason for existence is to help its members in every way we can. Ask the AAU to act as a focal point in bringing together various initiatives. And I have to say that since February, we've had the most incredible support from everybody, from our members, from the donors, from our governments, in this effort to bring us together, where we can begin to focus our energies in a more direct manner to advance the cause of what we all years so much. Steve has given a very good account of the ups and downs and indeed the many endpoints we've undergone in the process. I think all I can add is to emphasize that this conference ought to be one with a difference. It ought to be one who doesn't simply add the list of events or conferences. It ought to be a turning point in a very real sense. A turning point in the sense that we move from discussing problems, listing our achievements and our efforts, agreeing on our challenges, to move from all of that towards beginning to actually lay out a plan of action and the process for delivery on the things we all agree upon so easily. Since the General Conference in February, there were a number of events, including the Maputo Open Access Conference, including the Internet 2 in Philadelphia, and CERN in Geneva, and much work on the Internet. What we've done, in short, is to try through a deliberately participatory process to identify the interests at play, the players at work, and through consultation, extensive consultation, to bring together as best we can the key ideas and key players together. This conference, therefore, represents, in many ways, a different kind of conference. We've assembled not only those involved in policy making and thinking, but also the implementers. And our hope is that we shall be able, at the end of the day, to arrive at a framework of action, broad lines of going forward, which will enable us to begin to actually optimally help ourselves to go forward. We shall hear from national networks. They wrote some very historic level. I was amazed to hear what is being done in the face of very great efforts. We'll be engaging with the regional efforts and providers and players. And I hope that we all of us appreciate, by the end of the day, that the task before us is massive and important, and none of us is able on our own to go forward. But acting collectively, acknowledging our weaknesses and differences, and taking a positive, collaborative line is the only way to really bring the fruits which are promised by the Internet and ICT generally to reality. I sincerely hope that all of us will, in the course of discussing the specific things of our assignments, keep in mind the need to end up at the beginning of a common road that will take us forward. With these words, I welcome you again to this conference and really express my happiness of my board for our being able to get to this point. I look forward to a day and a half very productive and I hope effective discussions. Let me now introduce our keynote speaker of the morning, very briefly. Professor Venancio Masinge is the Minister for Science and Technology in Mozambique, and is here in that capacity. Many of us have known him for other things than being a minister of state. And so he is so quite surprised by being a minister even now. We've known him as one of the foremost experts on ICT in Africa. And I sincerely hope that his ministerial occupations have not dulled his interest in ICT or his capacity to invoke in all of us the spirit to go forward. So I invite Minister Masinge to address us, but also I invite the expert on ICT to help us move forward. That's it.
would like to say that as a minister, you always have the so-called formal speech that someone write for you, and you have to stick to that. But being with you, I am tempted, without offending the protocols, to come to the natural life in which I am always have been. First, I want to thank you very much for making me being a minister. I don't know what that means, but whatever it means, was thanks to the excellent work that I've been doing with all of you, that it was a recognition that I could operate at this level. I also want to tell you that being a minister is not very difficult, but being a deliverable minister is something different, and I have a very high expectation that you will help me to deliver as you did before. I would like to tell you that from my side, I see this position as a window for all of us who always believe it, that ICT, science and technology can give a high contribution for the development of our continent. So in Portuguese, you say, I'm doing politica. Politica in English can be politics, but also can mean policies. So now I have the chance of operating both on politics and policies, and I hope that we can take a better advantage of it. When I came in, I was saying I am a soldier, so you can call me anytime, whenever we need to do job that will have an impact. So I want to thank also IDRE for bringing me here and the other partners. We have a struggle, and the struggle is quite heavy, because poverty in Africa is doesn't show that it's going away, and we are the soldiers, the scientists, the academicians. We are the soldiers, and our weapons, it's the science and technology, and it's ICT. I hope then we'll have to do better for Africa to get away of poverty and of a non-written speech. So now I will go for the written speech. Dear brothers and partners, the quality of education and its output, scientific research, technology development, and innovation for Africa will only be valid if are made in Africa to solve real problems of Africans in the fight for poverty eradication and its own development challenges. I have visited a lot of education and research institutions to clearly be continuously confronted with the same problems. And I mentioned them, there are three. One is that the state in which the educational and the research infrastructure are undertaken. The second one, the state in which the education and the research staff are working. And the third one, the educational and the research system and working environment in which the researchers are expected to operate. It is becoming more and more obvious that education and the research cannot operate on its way without integrating its work in the great subject of development of Africa. Unfortunately, with few exceptions, academic staff, researchers, and the students on one side, and the emerging African industry in the other side, suffer from inability to engage in a collaborative projects that would lead to real problem solving. Even on sharing ideas among themselves is a missing link. Most scientists convinced that are doing important research become confined to their own world of work and they do not interact with their peers in the respective countries, in the region, or international on what they are doing. Because in many cases, when they expect an appreciation of the work that are doing from their leaders, when it does not come, they move from the south to the north in what can be seen as a shift of expensive capital or brain drain, if you want to call so. The lack of education and the research infrastructure, which doesn't offer great possibility for contacts and the knowledge access and share among scientists through networks. African tertiary education and the research institution will be constrained, and the best of Africa's scholars and technicians will seek opportunities elsewhere, while in our speeches we are appealing for African and diaspora to return. I am here making a very strong point that our researchers who are already here, our technical people, should be given more and more value. And we don't only think on those ones who are already in the diaspora. Otherwise, we enter in a continuous cycle of calling over on the ones who are in the diaspora when we don't keep the ones who are here. African universities need to produce agile, forward thinkers and leaders who are aware of national needs and global trends. At the moment, Africa is suffering from the absence of data from critical analysis and proper planning, preventing and focusing on issues such as rural development programs, agriculture, malaria, floods, etc. In front of such challenges, Internet is the mean to human collaboration in the national and global scale. By recognizing its importance, the developing countries have developed and equipped their researchers with the necessary tools as recognition for the roles that collaborative infrastructure will do. Our pledge is to our partners in general, bilateral and multilateral, to really support us on addressing more forcibly on building technical and human capacity. Africa is getting more and more ready to the Made in Africa solution and should be given voice and means to move on. In the knowledge economy and the knowledge society, Africa is recognizing that scientific research, technology innovations, and is its prime productive force in order to give added value to its own raw material and immensity of its available natural resources. In order to promote collaboration and access to information, African pioneers brought the internet to their universities and to the continent. If in those times such initiative served as a mere starter, today we need to press for the level of bandwidth necessary to support education, research, and outreach, locally, regionally, and globally. We cannot exhaust the few made available financial resources and keep ourselves on talks and discussing as much as time goes, while the digital divide is at its most extreme in the research and education. Just as an illustration, while scientists in the north give as much as 1 gigabit per second connection for $1 per megabit per second per month, African institutions are paying as much as $5,000 US for 1 megabit per second per month. The adoption by the African Ministers of Science and Technology of Africa, the so-called Consolidated Plan of Action in Dakar, August 2005, showed the commitment to which African leaders are to scientific-based development approach. The plan has been designed by the African Union and NIPLAND. On November the 3rd, the Ministers of Science and Technology of SADC will be meeting to discuss and put in march mechanisms to smooth the process to lead the implementation of such plan at national and regional level. Of course, internet bandwidth will be one of the topics that will deserve high attention. Therefore, we would like to urge our experts and partners to accelerate the ongoing plans on TNET, INET, Maligo, KeyNet, EduMed, Connect, Terena, AVU, Sarua, IAF, World Bank, GICT, AFNET, to take advantages of those moves on the science and technology to establish the proper bandwidth for Africa. We are there with the same vision and the desire of having Africa taking advantage of the knowledge economy and the knowledge society. We have all proven through the African Information Society initiative that when we have a coordinated issue, we can come up with a successful development. The National Information Communication Infrastructure process is a proof of that, and now we need to put a proper bandwidth as a top priority. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks very much, Aki, Minister Masinge. I can't help but reflect that as I was giving the very subjective history of the growth of African research in education networking, Minister Masinge is the history of African research and education networking in a very real way. It represents the early vision, the challenges, the growth of the early net, and indeed the vision for its moving forward. So it's inspiring to be with you. We're going to take a break now, but just a couple of things. One, would all of the presenters for panel 1 and panel 2 make sure that your presentations have been given to over here, please, at this table. And we're going to break for 20 minutes and come back at exactly 10 o'clock, and where we're going to get started into the individual sessions. Thanks. I'll pass the chair to Isatu's secretary.
Good morning to you all. I hope you all had a great flight with no lost luggages, with the exception of Steve. Please bear with us this morning. I think we have a couple of panelists here who arrived early this morning, so they might be a bit sleepy, but please bear with us. My name is Aissatou Serkaja. I work for the Medical Research Council in Gambia, but I represent African Network Operators Group. And I'll be sharing this morning's session on building campus-level capacity and infrastructure. I think for most of you have been attending a series of meetings over the past year on this topic, particularly the Internet 2 meeting in Philadelphia. You will recall that there was a lot of discussion on this important topic, on the importance of building capacity and infrastructure at the base level, and which is the campus level. I think you'll all agree that this is the campus level. It's very important to build capacity and infrastructure at this level. Today we'll be hearing a series of interesting presentations on this topic. Each presenter will be given 10 minutes, and I promise I'll be very strict. I have a stopwatch right next to me so that we can catch up on time. And we will be taking questions at the end, and we will first give a summary of the key issues that were discussed, and we will be taking questions at the end. Thank you. I'll first invite Bob Hawkins from the World Bank Institute, who will be talking on lessons for the future of campus network. He will be setting the scene for us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you this morning. I'm going to share with you a study that was done last year around this time around the state of Africa connectivity. Steve mentioned it in his introduction. It's called the ATIC study. And then also begin to set the stage a bit for some of the lessons that come out of this study for the future of campus networking. Let me just first say, give credit to the authors from Cyberplex Africa, Roy, who's not with us here today, and Ayesha, Mike Jensen, and Karanja. And this study was done under the auspices of the AVU and leadership by Peter Jimbo and Alex Twino, who are also in the audience. The scope of the study included 83 institutions in 40 countries around Africa. And it was collected, as I said, right around this time last year. I might add that there's another study being put together jointly funded by IDRE and the bank to kind of update this data and try to include more institutions. We're hoping to have some preliminary feedback from that study by tomorrow, but it will be coming out before the end of the year, and we'll make sure that it's shared with all of you when it does come out. The study looked at the types of connectivity, capacity, costs, existing types of providers, VSAT use and license agreements, the regulatory issues, levels of computer infrastructure, bandwidth monitoring and management, and then the types of initiatives that are happening on the ground. Let me first start with bandwidth availability, and I don't think any of this information is going to be new to anybody, so I'll go through these slides fairly quickly. There isn't enough bandwidth. The average institution has about the same level of connectivity as a US or European household. That being said, there's huge demand for connectivity in African universities. The average percentage of time where links are 100% capacity is 60%, and this is obviously very big considering the 24-hour length of time that this is measured over. Let me move on to bandwidth cost. On average, institutions pay around $5.46 kilobits per second per month, which is again equivalent to about 50 times what a US university pays for. And this is the average, including a lot of the universities in North Africa that pay substantially less. As we all know, there are universities that pay upwards around 10, 15 kilobits per second per month. Again, the rule that the greater amount of bandwidth you purchase, the lower marginal cost, which we'll get into later. Regionally, West African institutions are paying the most, whereas North Africans are paying the least. Within countries, which is surprising, again, the power of information, the power of networking and sharing information. One kind of interesting finding is that in Botswana, there are huge disparities in what individual universities in one country are paying, which again illustrates how, as Steve, I think, illustrated at the beginning, individual ISPs are kind of picking